Hello, good morning all of you. It's me Prashant, and you had the SS classes first with geography by your Vidya ma'am, and again one more class from the side of your Prashant sir. So I'm going to teach you SS history part, and as you know that the last year also I was your teacher for teaching SS, which means history. So when you reached in 8th standard, let me tell you one matter to you, that when you were in 7th standard, I was teaching you history and we had such a big textbook, and I'm sure that you all had some issues with the textbook and where should you read and what should you write, and we had cut some chapters and the essential chapters which we wanted to the 8th standard that we discussed already, right? Okay dears. So I'm so glad to be a part of you in this year too, and we will be starting with the first history chapter. We will not be starting because that is not an important chapter for us, and this year we are going to learn a section of history, that is Indian history. As I mentioned when you were in the last year in 7th standard, I mentioned to you, when you come to 8th standard you will be learning that Indian history. Very easy topics are there in this Indian history. Okay, very easy topics. So first of all, you set your mind that I will be reading this very interestingly so that we can do it very smoothly. Okay, are you ready guys? Okay, see, the second history chapter is from trade to territory. What is it? From trade to territory. So when that chapter starts, you can see some writings, you can see some paragraphs. I'm not reading the textbook, I'm taking the paragraph wise explanations, and you listen that explanation very clearly so that you can easily identify the topics. Okay, very simple, means very simple. Indian history is so simple, you can learn easily and you can score better marks. Okay, I'm sure about that. And I know you, all of you personally, and you all are intelligent enough to cope the new situations too. Okay, so let us start the chapter. The first paragraph, there you can see that 1707 is an year in that paragraph, and there is a name, that Aurangzeb. And who was Aurangzeb? Aurangzeb, let me tell you, Aurangzeb was one of the powerful ruler of Mughal Empire. You might have heard about Mughal Empire, is it? Mughal Empire was started by or set in India by Babur, is it? In 1526, when it was 1526. So the last powerful ruler of Mughal Empire was Aurangzeb. Who was the last powerful ruler of Mughal Empire? Aurangzeb. See, we need to remember that Mughal Empire was such a massive and such a vast empire. Almost all the regions of India were under the control of this Mughal Empire. Almost every sections of India, every regions of India, every territories of India were under the control of whom? The Mughal Empire. That Mughal Empire's last powerful ruler was Aurangzeb. Who was the last powerful ruler of Mughal Empire? Yes, Aurangzeb. Okay. Then after Aurangzeb, it does not mean that the Mughal Empire completely collapsed and all the Mughal relatives and the related people were died. No, their power has lost. Their power, what they had experienced till Aurangzeb, had gone away. There were many reasons why this Mughal Empire, why such a big empire who had stronghold over almost all part of our country, how did they leave? How did they miss the power? That is what the core part of the chapter. Okay, when Aurangzeb had passed away, Aurangzeb had many officials. Since a ruler who rules over a vast area of land, he should definitely get the help of some officials, right? When Aurangzeb had passed away, Whatever regions that he had controlled, everywhere he had appointed some officials. They were called Subaddars. These Subaddars, they themselves declared that the region which was given to them for assisting Aurangzeb, after the death of Aurangzeb, those regions became independent under those officials, and those officials were telling that I am the ruler of this area. So which means the vast territory which was under the control of a single ruler, that was Aurangzeb, it was splitted into many hands. The officials of Aurangzeb or Mughal empires, they themselves declared that the region which were under them, and those regions king, they themselves selected. They themselves selected as the area's ruler. Which means India was divided into number of pieces, varieties of rulers, and each rulers were fighting each other for what? For having more wealth. So I'm telling these all, when Mughal Empire was here in our country, dears, there were no such clashes between the people, because the Mughal rulers were capable enough to solve all the issues. There was a centralized administration. When Aurangzeb had passed away, there were no single ruler. There were no apex leader. Every officials of Mughal Empire, they themselves considered as the rulers, and they started to fight each other to get the territory of others. Which means the domestic situation of India was horrible, which means the Indian people and the rulers of India were fighting each other, and Indians were not having an internal unity. Internal unity is compulsory. Indians were not having that internal unity. This was the first part of this chapter. Now I think you could understand what were the situation of India during the time of Mughal Empire, and after the Mughal Empire, which means after the death of Aurangzeb, what happened to India. Number of rulers had been originated, and they were not having a proper adjustment. They were fighting continuously, and that paved the way. That paved the way for the arrival of the foreigners into India. Okay, that paved. When we people are fighting each other, imagine that right now we have a situation, the Chinese people are trying to get some of the territories of India, and the Indian army and the Indian society and the Indian government is strongly supporting for India. No Indians are supporting for China, right? Why? India is our country. Is it? This India feel was not there. Each and every rulers were fighting each other. Look at that situation. That situation had given the motivation to the foreigners. They were looking at us. Who were looking at us? The foreigners, especially the Europeans, they were looking at us, and they were waiting for a chance to come into the country, because India was blessed with varieties of resources, my dears. These resources, rather than using these resources and reaching to the development, the Indian rulers were fighting each other. Okay. Rather than having a connection between each other, they were fighting. That opportunity have been capitalized by the European powers. So now we are going to the core part of the chapter. The second paragraph, you can see that 18th century, half of the 18th century, or the middle part of the 18th century, the entire political scenario of Indian situation or India was totally horrible, which means Indian rulers were fighting each other. There were no single ruler. There were no apex government. There were no systematic administration, my dears, in the half of the 18th century, or we can say that after the death of Aurangzeb, India had not witnessed a proper administrative system. As a result of that, Half of the 18th century, they were coming to us. Who were coming to us? The Europeans, especially. Tell me which country? Which country? British had reached to India. See, East India Company comes from East. Who? British East India Company. British East India Company, a company which came from Britain or United Kingdom, and that United Kingdom was comprised with 4,000 small islands. But the people who were there in these 4,000 islands, what we called as United Kingdom or Britain, were clever enough to loot our resources or to take our resources, and they became rich. Actually, if India has resources, that resources should have been used by the Indian population, and that resources and that wealth would be helpful for the growth of the Indian people. But instead of that, British East India Company coming to us, they were not coming to us, they were not reaching to India for civilizing us. What is civilizing? They were not coming to India for helping the Indian people here, that you have to set a good government. They did not come for that target. They came to India for collecting the resources. Understood? They wanted to loot the resources. They wanted to exploit the resources. For that they came to India. So East India Company is coming to India. Actually, I told you 1707 Aurangzeb had passed away, right? See, before the death of Aurangzeb, British East India Company's members had reached in India from 1600 AD onwards. Understood? When Mughal Empire was so strong in India, the representatives of British East India Company, 1600 AD, Queen Elizabeth I was the ruler of Britain. She sent a company from Britain to India. At that time, this Aurangzeb and his former rulers were there here in India, and they were powerful enough. But at those time, British East India Company could not make any slight step against, at least a slight step against the Indian rulers, because Mughal rulers were such a powerful authority in India. They were here in India. Who were there in India? British East India Company's officials were here in India. They were moving different parts of our country. They were collecting the goods from Indian producers, and the same amount they were giving to whom? The Indian producers, and trade was going on very smoothly, because if any foreign company who were trying to cheat the Indian producers, those people will be caught and punished by these Mughal rulers. 1600 AD's case we are telling. When Aurangzeb was the ruler, the British officials, very humble manner, they used to meet Aurangzeb and asked him that, would you be able to give a small plot of land for us for setting our industry or for storing the products? Since they were collecting varieties of articles from different parts of India, they wanted to store these products in India. For that, they requested Aurangzeb. For what? To get a piece of land for setting their storehouse or a warehouse. Aurangzeb said, no, never. We will not be giving any piece of land. If you purchase anything, carry it out. But we won't be giving any piece of land to you. Continuously, repeatedly, the British officials were meeting Aurangzeb, and finally they got a plot of land on the river Hooghly. Where? Hooghly, in West Bengal. Hooghly, nearby the Hooghly river, they got a plot of land which was allotted by Aurangzeb, and more than that, Aurangzeb had given lot of facilities for the British East India Company for their trade, my dears. Okay, those things we will be learning later. Now you try to understand. Britishers got a small plot of land from Aurangzeb. When after the death of Aurangzeb, the British East India Company became the massive one. And 1600 AD they came to India with a charter. The charter is been given in the next paragraph. You can see that. Okay, royal charter not preventing. Okay, British East India Company, they were coming to Britain, to India. Their benefit or their aim was, our Queen Elizabeth I had given the permission to British East India Company. Why, you know? As per the charter or as per the agreement which was given by Queen Elizabeth I to British East India Company, no other British companies from Britain would come to India for competing with East India Company. British East India Company was one of the company came from Britain to India for looting the resource with the help of an agreement which was given by Queen Elizabeth I. Queen Elizabeth had given an agreement to the British East India Company. The agreement says that, what does that agreement say? That agreement says that no other trading company from Britain would come to India for competing with the East India. Only one company, that was the East India Company. But the charter the agreement which was given by Queen Elizabeth I, it was not preventing the other European countries. Next paragraph you can see. Okay, royal charter not preventing, which means Queen Elizabeth I, she had given an agreement for East India Company that this company can alone go from Britain to India for collecting the goods from there and collect maximum goods at cheap price and bring back to the European markets and sell it in the high price or with a huge profit. That was the target. So British East India Company members had come to India in 1600 AD with the target of getting maximum commodities from India at cheap price. But when British East India Company had reached to India, many other European companies were already set in our nation. Can you please tell me one of such company which set in our nation before the arrival of British East India Company? Who are they? Portuguese. You might have heard about Vasco da Gama. He had reached in India. He had reached at first in Calicut in Kerala state, isn't it? In 1498. When? 1498. So, what you want to remember from these paragraphs, which means the page number 10, all that area is telling you that British East India Company was one of the company which came from Britain and no other company from Britain would come again to India for competing with East India Company. This guarantee was given by the Queen Elizabeth I. But it does not mean that no other country, no other European country could come to India. Many European countries, people had reached to India for the same target what the British East India Company too had. Okay, so British East India Company were very happy because they were expecting much kind of spices from India and they wanted to get maximum cotton items from our country and they needed to carry all those commodities to the European market, and the European people were eagerly waiting in queue for collecting the Indian made commodities. Such a demanded commodity was produced in India. Okay. Such a great quality products were produced in India so that the European people were excited to get the products from India. With these all markets, With this all target of earning huge profit, British East India Company had come to India. But before the arrival of British East India Company, dears, Portuguese people were here. Do you know that when Vasco da Gama, actually he targeted somewhere else, but he unfortunately reached to India, especially in Kerala. When he came to Kerala, he was well received by our king, the Samudri. Calicut ruler, the Samudri, he invited him since he was a foreigner. We had a culture of accepting the guests. So the ruler called him and invited to the court. So from the court, he was looking at the corner. So when the Samudri was hugging this Vasco da Gama was not looking at and appreciating that Samudri's invitation. Okay. He was looking at the corner of the palace. There were the sacks of pepper. He was looking at that. He wanted that. Okay. So before the arrival of British East India Company in our nation, French East India Company was there. Portuguese company were there. Dutch company were there. Okay. But the aim, the target which followed by the European powers or the British East India Company, what was their target? To get maximum commodities at cheap price. But when they came to India, the situation was entirely different. Every European companies who were set in our nation, they wanted the same product. If British East India Company wanted cotton, they may be approaching the producer of a cotton and they may set a price that for 1 kg cotton, 50 rupees we British East India Company would give. Producers were having a capacity of bargaining. No, producers will say, no, never, we won't be giving 1 kg cotton to you at rupees 50. Because the Dutch East India Company is already ready for giving 100 rupees per kg, then how would they give the same product at rupees 50? So, French East India Company, British East India Company, Dutch East India Company, Portuguese East India Company, all of them wanted the same commodity, and there were the rivalry between these all Europeans. European countries, they came to India with the target of extracting maximum resources. But when they reached in our country, the situation was entirely different, and it was not easy for collecting the Indian made commodities at cheap price. We should definitely remember a matter that all these European countries had reached in India for a target. The target was collection of goods which produced in India at cheap price and carry it into the European market and sell it in the European market in high price or a huge profit. But from India, they could not purchase the commodities cheap price what they expected. This is what the first part of our chapter means for. And this is what you have to remember always. And what I'm telling you is, today we will be discussing only this much topic. Page from the introduction part of our chapter to page number 10. So what are the important things that you want to remember? Listen the class and at the same time read the textbook twice or thrice, and you will be getting the final works and everything later in the Google classrooms. Okay, so I repeat once again, please go through the textbook, read the textbook very clearly, and based on this class we will be having a Google Meet. Based on that Google Meet, I will be giving you certain kind of tasks, so that task will not be easy for you. That will be easy when you are reading the textbook very clearly. So listen the class as video, then take your textbook immediately, and along with the textbook take the dictionary, read the textbook. An unfamiliar word, definitely you will be finding that unfamiliar words can be matched with the dictionary terms, and you will be getting the correct meaning, and try to understand everything. So when you have doubt, you can contact me at any time. So till page number 10 you have to be thorough after listening this class and reading your textbook. So reading textbook is so important. Okay, I hope you all could do this task very easily, and you all are doing your work sincerely, and I should definitely appreciate all of you that your sincere approach towards your studies. Okay, so keep it up. So that's all for today. Till the next class. Bye. Thank you.